Welcome to this painting tutorial. How's it going, everyone? Welcome to this video. In this video I'm going to paint Angron for the Horus Heresy. This is one of my favorite characters of the books because I'm a big fan of world eaters in general. It's not super difficult to paint, but like other characters that have a lot of detail, you really have to take your time and be very careful not to mess up the previous colors. So it took me about 5 days, 5 sessions to finish this model entirely. And I decided to record it so that I can show it off in this channel. So I hope you enjoy it. So I started with a primed black model with Vallejo's surface primer. I used an airbrush primer this time through an airbrush because it generally goes very thin and doesn't cover a lot of detail. And the first color I'm going to use is Balthasar Gold. With this color I'm going to pretty much just paint the whole armor and every place that I think is going to be brass at the end. Just make sure that you're using thin paint and give it a couple coats if it doesn't cover it at the first time. I use generally just water. Only here and there I used a little bit of drying retarder to help me with the edges and to keep the paint wet longer. But most of the colors I just used a little bit of water, and I started painting all of the armor with this. After that's dry, I'm going to use Rakarth Flesh Shade, and I'm going to shade the whole model with this. This is supposed to go into all of the crevices and stuff, and be very careful not to let it pull too much. I was going to use the gloss shade, but I didn't like the way it looked at the end because it looked like it's like if it was wet, even though it was dry. So I decided to go with Rakarth Flesh Shade, the regular shade, and this is going to tone down the metallic. It's going to make it look a lot more matte. And for that I'm going to use Balthasar Gold again and go back into the model and just clean up. Just paint every place in the armor that is not a recess and bring back the metallic effect on the model. So yeah, the gloss shade, I didn't like it that much. It might be good for you, but I didn't like it. So I went with this instead. I'm using a size 2 watercolor brush with a very fine tip. And I'm going around trying to avoid all of the recesses and painting the armor again entirely. Next I'm going to use Bright Bronze from Game Color. This is a great color, as you may seen me use it on other tutorials. I like it a lot. This is the first highlight. I'm going to paint most of the most exposed parts and towards the edges of the model. This is going to go over most of the model, just leaving a little bit of the Balthasar Gold showing below it. And this is just bringing up the colors a little bit more to the highlight color. Once that's done, I'm going to mix up Bright Bronze with Model Air Steel and just a little bit of a steel color into the Bright Bronze to give it another highlight. And this is going to go towards the edges, just trying to work into the final highlight. And just pick up the places that are more sharp and more exposed to light, and the ones that reflect more light. And finally I'm going to use just steel on its own, and I'm just going to color in all of the more sharpest places that reflect more light to give it a very shiny highlight at the end, like so. And once we do this, the armor is finished. We're going to go ahead and paint all of the other details of the miniature. There's no exact order, but I'm going to start with Khorne Red, and I'm going to paint all of the cloth that is hanging from the armor of Angron. This is going to be a very easy step. I'm using a detail brush this time because I don't want to paint into the armor. So I'm trying to be very careful, although I could get away with using the size 2 brush that I was using earlier. I'm going to paint the face, and for that I'm going to start with the mouth, and that I'm going to paint with Screamer Pink real quick. Again, don't use any color straight from the pot. Make sure to thin it down a little. Next, Bugman's Glow, I'm going to use it to paint all of the skin around the model. This is just the hands and the face, and it's very easy. I chose to paint the mouth first because it's easier to paint the mouth and then paint around it with Bugman's Glow, and it's a lot easier to mess up if you're doing the other way around. Next, with Rakarth Flesh Shade, I'm going to shade all of the places that are going to be skin real quickly. Just let it settle onto the recesses real quick. And once it's done, I can start working on the eyes. The eyes were tricky. I'm going to start with Rhinox hide and paint the whole surface of the eye. And it's going to be very hard for me to show it to you because the detail is very small and it's very hard to paint it with both hands and let it show in the video. I'm using Palette Witch Flesh to paint the sides of the eye. And I know it's very hard to see, but I'm going to explain it on a piece of paper right now because I realize this is very hard to do on camera and to show to you. So I started with filling up the whole eye of the miniature, and then I'm come back with a Palette Witch Flesh and paint the sides like so. And it's going to be messy. You might paint the places on the side of the eye, but that's okay because you can come back with Rhinox hide again and contour the eyes from the outside and make sure that the eyes are colored in well. Once that's done, I'm going to use Emperor's Children, and with this color I'm going to highlight the tongue inside of the mouth. If you find it too hard to do the eyes, just don't worry about them, just leave them with shaded with Rakarth Flesh Shade, because it's very hard even for experienced painters to paint eyes, but it's doable for me, so I did it. But if you find it too hard, it's totally fine to leave the shaded sockets, eye sockets, like they are. Here I'm using Bugman's Glow and bringing up the colors on the skin, just painting the most raised parts, leaving a little bit of the detail of the recesses with Rakarth Flesh Shade. And then I'm going to use Cadian Fleshtone to paint a little bit more highlight to these areas, just leaving a little bit of the Bugman's Glow showing behind. And this is trying to make a little transition of paint and choosing the most protruded parts of the face to do that effect of shadows and lights. Next, with Kislev Flesh, this is going to be the final highlight for the skin, and this is going to go on the very brightest part of the skin, just the very edge of the brow there, the tip of the nose, and places that are most exposed to light. I'm using a detail brush for almost all of the places that I'm painting right now, because I'm trying to be very careful, and don't forget to thin down all of your colors so that the paint goes smooth and thin onto the model. Here I'm using Khorne Red, and with this I'm going to paint the war paint on the model's face. It's just a little, like a little spike on top of the Angron's head, and make sure to have the paint very thin so that you can control it well. Not very thin, but with an inky consistency. Next, I'm going to use Leadbelcher, and with this I'm going to color Angron's teeth because he has iron teeth. He lost them all in battles. I'm using a fine detail brush, a very old one, the last generation of brushes from GW. I'm just being very careful not to paint other stuff around the face. With Dryad Bark, after we finish the face, I'm going to go back and paint all of the places that are going to be belts of leather. This is very simple, just with a fine detail brush, just pick up all of those places that have like little leather bindings around the armor. And with the same color, I'm going to color in the cape of Angron real quick. When painting the cape, make sure to have the paint a little bit more watered down, even if it doesn't cover too well, because it has to get into all of the crevices. After that's done, I'm going to use Leadbelcher again, and I'm going to paint all of the metallic details around Angron. This includes the dreadlocks, the chains, the details behind the legs, and all of the teeth on the chain swords and stuff. The chain axes, actually. But here I'm using a detail brush with slightly more thinned down paint so that it goes into the crevices as well. And then with Agrax Earthshade, I'm going to go back into the cape and I'm going to shade in the whole thing. A lot of these steps are arbitrary, and it's the way I would paint my models. You can decide to paint them in a different order if you want. This is just the way I did it. And next I'm going to use black, model color black. And with this I'm just going to clean up the chain axes real quick. Because some of the metallic got into them, and that's fine if you do, because you can come back and clean up. And you don't want just the primer color showing on anywhere on the model, because you want a very uniform color and not a very matte primer-like color on the black. Next, with Gorthor Brown, here comes the fun part for me, is dry brushing. I picked up a very big dry brushing brush, and I just went to town with it. With a very dry brush. I try to pick up all of the detail on the cape real quick. Once that's done, I'm going to use Steel Legion Drab, and I'm going to do the same thing, but trying to focus on the more sharpest parts of the cape, but still getting a little bit of the detail on the recesses, not too much, trying to leave a little bit of the other color behind. And the final one is going to be with Rakarth Flesh, doing the same thing, but this is going to be more focused on the very edges and the sharpest bits of hair around the cape. Once that's done, I painted the chains. I already showed you with Leadbelcher, so I didn't go over it again. I'm going to use Zandri dust and paint all of the skulls, and if you have any bits of bone or anything, you can paint it with Zandri dust as well. Just being very careful and using thin paint just to not cover the detail on the miniature. Next, with Rakarth Flesh, I'm going to cover all of the leathery parts of the skin, of the pelt. This obviously got skin out of a very big animal, maybe a bear or something. So we need this to look like skin, I guess. Once that's done, I'm going to use Agrok's Earthshade. And with this color, I'm going to shade all of the places that we've painted that are not shaded, which are the Khorne red on the cloth, the leather, and the metallic silver, and all of these places that would need shading so that they have shadows in the recesses real quick. And in the cape, I'm going to shade in all of the chains and all of the skulls. I also painted the leathery part of the pelt with the wash all over this area, just making sure that it doesn't pull, because it's very easy to let it pull on a large area that doesn't have a lot of detail like that. So just be very careful not to let it pull too much. Here I'm cleaning up the Khorne red again, just leaving the recesses on with the previous color. You can go over this sort of rivets or whatever they called on the cloth, and then just individually shade them in with a fine detail brush. But I went around it because I don't know. Next, with Wild Rider Red, I'm going to try to pick all of the edges on this Khorne red areas around the model. Wild Rider Red is very high contrasting with Khorne red, and it looks very good. Just be very careful to be very thin the way you apply these edges onto the red, and they'll look pretty good. Bright Bronze, I'm gonna go back and paint all of the little details in this red areas, just to make them stand out again. Individually, I'm going to just go in with this fine detail brush, and be very careful not to paint on the red. And it's very easy to paint on the red, so be careful. Next, with Leadbelcher, I'm going to go back and paint the large open areas on the silver of the axes mainly. I don't think there's other places that need to be cleaned up from the wash. This is just to make them look a little bit more metallic, not so matte, and clean them up in general. Next, with Dark Reaper, I'm going to start highlighting the black. You could use dark gray like Mechanica Standard Gray, or the Eshin Gray is the one that I usually use. I just wanted to give it a little bit more bluish tint to the shadows of the axe, just to make it different. and I went over all of the edges very carefully, not to use too much on the edge. And then with Dawnstone, I'm going to pick up the sharpest edges and in general give it a lot more thinner edge highlight to make a little bit of a transition of color there, and it looks pretty good like this. Once that's done, I'm going to go back and use Runefang steel. You can use the Model Air steel paint in this step too. It looks very good, but it's very similar, and I kind of forgot I was using steel. But either way, you can use any of those two paints, and this is just to pick up all of the edges of the silver and the most brightest part on the axis and stuff like that, and kind of just overbrushing over the chains just to pick up the most raised parts of the chains. Next, with Scrag Brown, I'm going to use this color on the leather parts, just to try to pick up the edges that you can find on the leather. Once that's done, I'm going to use Balor Brown again. This is a very bright yellowish brown color that is going to give it a lot of pop to these leather areas, but you need another color behind it to make a little bit of a transition, because by itself it's very strong and very stark against the Dryad bark. Here I'm using Rakarth flesh again into the leathery part of the pelt, and this I'm just going to use it on the most raised parts and all of the edges of this area. The general area of this leathery part of the pelt is going to be just left alone with the wash, because I want it to be very ragged and very ugly and dirty and stuff, because Angron's not the cleanest guy around. Here I'm using Ushabti bone and cleaning up the skulls, leaving a little bit of the Zandri dust showing and the deepest recesses on the Agrax Earthshade, just to give it that very dark shadows. And once that's done, I'm going to use Screaming Skull, and I'm going to use this only on the sharpest edges of the skulls, the brow, the cheek there, and the very top of the head, just like that. And once that's done, you just attach the cape to the model, and that's it. This is the finished model, and I have to say I'm very happy with the way it turned out. If you want to paint an ultramarine like I did in the base, there's a tutorial that I have done in the past about ultramarines, and it's done pretty much the same way. In general, Angron's not that hard to paint. You just have to be attentive and find all the details and don't miss anything. I had a lot of fun painting it, even though it took like 5 or more sessions to finish it up. And that takes a lot of time for me that I could use to paint a lot more tutorials, but that's fine. I really like Angron, and I think I did a pretty good job, and I hope you like this video. And if you do, please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and click that bell so that you don't miss any of my coming videos. I hope you found this video informative and helpful. If anything, I hope it inspires you to paint your Primarchs. So that is all for me. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope to see you on the next video. Thank you very much for watching.
You stayed. Great. Thank you very much for watching my video, and if you would like to further support my channel, you can become my Patreon on Patreon. You can pledge as little as $1 a month, and you are helping me create more and better content. If you can't, that's fine, because you're helping my channel a lot just for watching and sharing, but you can read all of the details if you follow the link in the description below. I hope you can spare $1 to make this hobby of mine a job for which I can get paid. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you on the next video.